She told him not to enter the elevator. 30 seconds later, the cables snapped exactly as she predicted. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was late afternoon when Rachel, a waitress at the high-end Westbrook Tower restaurant, was preparing for the evening rush. She had been working there for months and had seen her fair share of wealthy clients, from CEOs to celebrities. But none of them had ever caught her attention the way William Turner did. William was a man of power, a billionaire tech mogul who had built his fortune from the ground up. He was in his early 40s, tall, impeccably dressed, with a demeanor that exuded confidence and control. It was the kind of presence that made people step aside when he walked into a room. Yet, despite his intimidating aura, there was something in his eyes that seemed distant, almost distracted, as if his mind was always elsewhere. Rachel had served him before, but today felt different. There was an unusual energy in the air. As Rachel walked past the elevator lobby, she noticed William standing by the elevator, looking at his phone, as usual. The elevator doors were about to close when she heard the faint sound of a voice calling to him. "Mr. Turner, you shouldn't take the elevator right now," she said, her voice steady but firm. William didn't look up from his phone at first. "Why not?" he asked, a trace of annoyance in his tone. "There's something wrong with the cables. I overheard some of the engineers talking about it earlier." Rachel's words were simple, but the weight behind them felt heavy in the air. William's gaze lifted from his phone, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her face. He didn't take her seriously. "Are you an expert on elevators now?" he said with a sarcastic laugh, brushing off her warning. Rachel stood still, her calm demeanor unwavering. "I just know when something's not right. I'd suggest you wait for the next one, Mr. Turner." William hesitated for a moment, his eyes lingering on her with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. He was used to people obeying his commands without question, but this was different. Something about her calm certainty made him pause, even if just for a second. "Fine," he said, tapping his phone screen once more. "I'll wait for the next one. But if you're wrong, I'll have to take it up with building maintenance." Rachel didn't respond. She simply nodded and turned away, continuing her rounds. She had no idea why she had said what she did. It was just a feeling, a gut instinct, that she couldn't ignore. 30 seconds later, the elevator cables snapped, sending the lift plummeting several floors before coming to a violent halt. Inside, the passengers were thrown to the ground, screaming in terror. The building's emergency systems kicked in, and alarms began to blare throughout the tower. Rachel was standing just outside the elevator shaft when it happened. The sound of the snap echoed through the hallway, followed by the deafening crash of metal against concrete. She didn't flinch. She had known. Her instincts had been right. She turned back toward the elevator, her face expressionless, and walked calmly toward the service area. Meanwhile, William Turner, shaken and alive by sheer luck, stood frozen, staring at the elevator doors in disbelief. He hadn't believed her. He hadn't taken her warning seriously. And now he owed her his life. William Turner was still standing by the elevator shaft, his heart pounding in his chest as the chaos unfolded around him. He had heard the crash, the terrifying screech of metal, and the desperate screams of those inside the elevator, but it hadn't fully hit him yet. He was alive. He was safe. But why? Why had Rachel warned him? Was it just a lucky guess? Or was there something more to her words? The building's emergency team had already arrived, and the lobby was flooded with activity. Firefighters, medics, and building security rushed to the scene to assess the damage and help those who were trapped inside. But William stood frozen, his mind racing. He had dismissed her so easily. He had brushed off her warning as just another ridiculous observation from a waitress who didn't know her place. And now he owed her. He owed her everything. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of someone approaching. Rachel appeared from the service area, her movements calm and deliberate, as though nothing unusual had happened. She walked past the emergency team without a glance, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on William. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and William felt a strange sense of connection. The panic in his chest began to subside, replaced by a deep sense of awe. She had known. She had saved him. She had saved them all. Mr. Turner, Rachel said, her voice steady and professional, as though this was just another day at work. I hope everyone is okay. William opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to thank her. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. I told you not to take the elevator, she continued, her gaze unwavering. It wasn't safe. You were right, William finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know how you knew, but you saved my life. Rachel didn't smile, didn't show any sign of pride or satisfaction. She simply nodded. It's not about saving lives. It's about paying attention when no one else does. William watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the crowd. He felt a wave of guilt wash over him. How many times had he ignored people like Rachel? How many times had he dismissed their warnings, their ideas, their worth? He had always seen himself as someone above it all, a man who controlled everything, who had the power to make things happen with a snap of his fingers. But in that moment, standing in the aftermath of the elevator disaster, he realized how wrong he had been. He had underestimated the people around him, and Rachel was the perfect example of that. He had dismissed her as just another face in the crowd, but she had seen something he hadn't. She had saved him without even trying. William felt a strange mix of admiration and shame. He had built his empire on the idea that success was about making the right moves, the right connections, and being in control. But Rachel had taught him that sometimes success was about listening. Sometimes success was about seeing the people around you, not just the ones who could help you climb higher, but the ones who quietly made the world better. And he had missed that. The following days were a blur for William. The incident with the elevator had shaken him to his core, but it also left him with a lingering sense of unease. He couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. She was a mystery to him. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who had the ability to see things before they happened, to understand the subtle signs that everyone else ignored. And he needed to understand her. He needed to know what made her tick. It was this obsession that led him to the restaurant the next evening. He walked in, his usual air of confidence replaced with something else, something quieter, more introspective. Rachel was behind the counter, as usual, her back to the door. He approached her slowly, unsure of what to say. When she turned and saw him, her face remained neutral, but her eyes flickered with recognition. Mr. Turner, she said, her voice calm but not surprised. What can I do for you? I need to talk to you, William said, his tone more urgent than he had intended. About the elevator, about what happened. Rachel raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. I don't understand how you knew, William continued, his voice softening. How did you know it wasn't safe? Rachel didn't answer immediately. She simply studied him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. I've seen it before. Not just elevators, but situations where people think they're in control, and everything's fine, and then it's not. William was silent for a moment, processing her words. It was clear that Rachel was more than just a waitress. She was someone who had seen the world for what it really was. And she had the ability to predict what was coming, even when no one else could. He didn't know why, but he felt an undeniable urge to know more. You have a gift, he said quietly. Rachel's gaze shifted slightly, and for a split second, he thought he saw something akin to a smile. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it's just paying attention. Either way, it's not about gifts. It's about knowing when to step up, when to trust your instincts, and when to act. William nodded, a sense of understanding dawning on him. He had spent his whole life trying to control everything. But Rachel had taught him something he had never learned in all his years of business. Sometimes, letting go and trusting your instincts was the most powerful thing you could do. He didn't know where this conversation would lead, but he knew one thing for sure. Rachel was no ordinary waitress. She was someone he wanted to know better. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was the one person who could teach him how to truly see the world. William couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within him after his encounter with Rachel. The elevator incident was more than just a close call. It had been a wake-up call. He had spent so many years climbing the corporate ladder, amassing wealth and power. But in that moment, standing on the edge of disaster, he realized that he had overlooked something essential: the people around him. He had never stopped to truly see them. His obsession with control and success had blinded him to the world beyond his boardrooms and conference tables. But Rachel, she had seen it all. She had predicted the failure of the elevator with nothing more than a feeling, a gut instinct that most people would have ignored. William didn't know if he was more intrigued by her gift or by her ability to remain calm in the face of danger. Either way, he needed to understand her better. It had been a week since the elevator incident, and William found himself walking into the restaurant again. He had been there several times before, but each visit had been ordinary, filled with business meetings and the usual crowd of wealthy patrons. Today was different. He was searching for something he couldn't quite explain. As he entered, he spotted Rachel behind the counter, her back to him as she served a table. Her movements were fluid, efficient, but there was something more to it. A quiet confidence. He waited for a moment, watching her interact with the guests. She was kind, professional, but there was an air of mystery about her that captivated him. When she turned and saw him standing near the door, their eyes met, and he felt a jolt of recognition. It was as if they shared a secret, something unspoken between them. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice as calm as ever. "How can I help you today?" William walked up to the counter, his heart racing just a little faster than usual. "I was hoping we could talk," he said, his voice unsteady. "About what happened last week, and about you." Rachel didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. She simply nodded and gestured for him to sit. "I'm listening," she said, as she wiped down the counter. William hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't understand how you knew about the elevator. How did you know it was going to fail?" Rachel looked at him with a thoughtful expression, her eyes piercing. "It's not about knowing. It's about paying attention. Things don't just happen out of nowhere. There are signs. If you're paying attention, you'll see them." William's mind raced. He had spent his entire life chasing success, analyzing data, making decisions based on hard facts. But this was something different. This was intuition. This was something he had never been taught in any business school or boardroom. "But how can you be so sure?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. Rachel paused for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the counter as if considering how to answer. "Because I've been in situations where the stakes were high," she said softly, "where lives were on the line. I've learned to trust my instincts, even when no one else does." There was a weight to her words, a depth of experience that William couldn't ignore. He had always prided himself on his ability to think strategically, to outsmart his competition. But this was a different kind of intelligence. It was raw, unfiltered, and powerful in a way he couldn't quite understand. "You've been in dangerous situations?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of curiosity. Rachel's gaze shifted slightly, and for a brief moment, William saw something flicker in her eyes, a shadow of something painful. "I've seen enough to know that life can change in an instant," she said, her voice steady. "And sometimes, the only thing you can rely on is your gut." William nodded slowly, processing her words. He couldn't deny that he was intrigued. But more than that, he felt a growing sense of admiration for her. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a bystander in this world of wealth and power. She was someone who had learned to navigate life's uncertainties with a quiet strength that he hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking about what you said," William said, his voice softer now. "About paying attention. About trusting my instincts. I've spent so long focused on the big picture, the numbers, the deals, but I've ignored the smaller things. The people, the moments that matter." Rachel didn't respond immediately. Instead, she simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. William felt a pang of regret in his chest. He had spent so much time building his empire, but he had forgotten what it meant to truly connect with others. "I don't want to make the same mistakes," he said quietly. "I want to learn. I want to understand." Rachel studied him for a long moment, her gaze intense. Finally, she nodded. "Learning is a lifelong process, but it starts with being open to what's in front of you." William nodded, a new sense of purpose settling in his chest. He had been given a second chance, not just with the elevator, but with life, and he wasn't going to waste it. As he stood to leave, Rachel gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You'll figure it out," she said. "Just remember to listen." William walked out of the restaurant that day with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. He had been so focused on the path ahead, on the next deal, the next acquisition, that he had forgotten to appreciate the people around him. But now he understood. Life wasn't just about winning. It was about learning, growing, and paying attention to the things that really mattered. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to embrace that lesson. William's life had taken a strange turn over the past few days. Since his conversation with Rachel, something inside him had shifted. He had never been the type to second-guess himself, but now, he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about success, about people, and about life. It was unsettling, but in a way, it felt like he was finally seeing the world in a different light. He had come to the restaurant more than once in the past week, seeking out Rachel, but she was always elusive. When she did appear, it was always for just a brief moment. Her calm demeanor and thoughtful eyes almost like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. She didn't push him for answers. She didn't ask him what he was looking for. She simply observed, as though waiting for him to reach a conclusion on his own. But William wasn't one to leave things unfinished. He had made up his mind. He was going to find out what made Rachel tick. It was a Wednesday afternoon when he found himself once again sitting at the bar in the restaurant. The lunch crowd had thinned out, and the clink of silverware and quiet chatter filled the air. William was sitting in a secluded corner, his gaze occasionally flickering to the kitchen door where Rachel was working. As usual, she moved with quiet efficiency, serving the few remaining patrons, her focus entirely on the task at hand. It was as if nothing and no one could break her concentration. But today, he wasn't just watching her from afar. He had a plan. When Rachel finally came over to him with a menu, she smiled politely, but there was something different in the way she looked at him. William could tell that she had noticed his presence, noticed the subtle shift in his behavior. "Back again?" she asked, her voice warm but laced with the same professional detachment he had come to expect. "I need to talk to you again," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency that hadn't been there before. "About what happened about you." Rachel didn't seem surprised. She didn't flinch or try to brush him off. Instead, she simply nodded and gestured to the empty seat next to him. "Okay," she said. "What's on your mind?" William leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his fingers drumming softly against the wood. "You said something that stuck with me," he began, his voice low. "You said life isn't about just knowing the right moves, but about trusting your instincts, about paying attention to what's in front of you. I've been thinking about that." Rachel tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just a touch, as though she were weighing his words. "And?" she asked, her tone calm, but with a hint of curiosity. "I've spent my whole life building this empire, making all the right decisions, following the rules, using logic, calculations. But I've realized I've been missing something. People. The human element. The moments that matter." Rachel was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on him. William couldn't tell if she was waiting for him to continue or if she was simply letting him process his thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "You've been too focused on the destination, not the journey," she said softly. "But you can't get to the right place if you don't understand the people along the way." William nodded slowly, his chest tightening as he processed her words. She was right, of course. He had spent so much time chasing success that he had forgotten to connect with the people who were walking beside him. He had never stopped to really listen. "I'm not just talking about business," he continued, his voice growing softer. "I'm talking about life. About the people around me. I've been blind to them, to their value. I've overlooked the quiet moments that can change everything." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. William felt vulnerable under her gaze, but he couldn't look away. There was something about her that made him feel like he was finally being seen, for who he truly was. "I don't know how to fix it," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I don't know how to make it right." Rachel smiled, a small, knowing smile, and shook her head. "You don't need to fix it. You just need to start paying attention. The rest will follow." William felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was as if, in that moment, he had been given permission to stop trying to control everything, to stop measuring everything by numbers and profits and strategies. He didn't have to have all the answers right now. He just needed to start seeing. "So what now?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Now," Rachel said, her eyes glinting with a hint of amusement. "Now, you start by looking at things differently. Start by seeing the people who matter. Start by listening." William didn't know what had changed inside him, but something had. He had spent his life thinking that power came from control, but now he understood that true power came from understanding, from connection. As he left the restaurant that day, William felt a strange sense of calm. He didn't know where this new path would lead him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to walk it. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was truly alive. William's life had taken an unexpected turn over the past few weeks. His meetings with Rachel had become more frequent, and as much as he tried to deny it, he knew something had shifted inside him. The world he had spent his entire life building, the empire of wealth, success, and power, felt hollow. It wasn't that he was no longer driven by ambition. It was that he began to understand that there was something far more valuable than money: human connection. Rachel had become more than just the waitress who had saved him from the elevator disaster. She had become a mirror, reflecting parts of himself he hadn't wanted to see. Every time he spoke with her, he felt both challenged and at ease. It was as if her very presence allowed him to relax into a version of himself he had buried long ago. It was late one evening when William decided to visit her again. He had been thinking about what she said. That success wasn't just about making the right moves, but about paying attention to the people and moments that mattered. He walked into the restaurant, his mind already made up. Tonight, he wasn't just going to talk to Rachel about business or life. He was going to open up to her, in a way he had never opened up to anyone before. As usual, Rachel was behind the counter, effortlessly handling the orders with grace and calm. She didn't seem surprised to see him, but she did give him a long, thoughtful look as he approached. "You're back," she said with a small smile, though there was a hint of curiosity in her voice. "I'm back," William replied, sitting down at the counter. "And I think I need to be honest with you, Rachel." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened, as if she could already tell this wasn't going to be a typical conversation. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," William continued. "About the elevator, about our talks, about everything I've learned from you. And I realized something. I've spent my whole life chasing the wrong things. I've focused on building an empire, but I've neglected the people around me. And now, I don't know how to fix that." Rachel didn't speak at first. She simply studied him, her gaze calm, unwavering. William could feel the weight of her attention, the quiet understanding she always seemed to exude. "You can't fix it overnight," Rachel said finally, her voice soft but firm. "It's not about fixing anything. It's about starting from where you are. It's about being present, being real." William nodded, absorbing her words. There was so much he had to learn, but for the first time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by it. Instead, he felt a strange sense of peace. "I don't know if I've ever really been real with anyone," he admitted, his voice low. "Not in the way that matters." Rachel's smile was small but genuine. "That's okay," she said. "It's never too late to start." William felt his chest tighten as something unexpected welled up inside him. "I've been so focused on being the best, on winning, on conquering everything, but I never stopped to think about the kind of person I wanted to be. I'm not sure I even know what that looks like anymore." Rachel leaned against the counter, her arms folded across her chest, as she regarded him quietly. "You don't have to have all the answers," she said. "You just have to be willing to look at the world differently, to see it, and the people in it, for what they truly are." William swallowed hard. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, walls that made him feel secure, but also isolated. He had always been the one in control, always the one making the decisions. But now, as he sat in front of Rachel, he realized how much he had been missing. It wasn't about control. It was about connection. "I don't know where to start," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to change everything." Rachel smiled again, but this time it was a little softer, more reassuring. "You start by being honest with yourself," she said. "By letting go of the need to be perfect. Just be who you are." William sat there in silence, taking in her words. He had been so consumed by the idea of perfection, of being the best at everything, that he had forgotten what it meant to simply be human, to be flawed, to be vulnerable. "I think I've been afraid of letting go," he admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Afraid of being real with people. Afraid of showing them the person I really am." Rachel's eyes softened even more, if that was possible. "Being real is the only thing that matters. And if you want to change the way you see the world, you have to start by seeing yourself first." William took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside him. He had spent so much of his life trying to control everything, but now, for the first time, he was ready to let go, to embrace the uncertainty, the imperfections. to be present, to be human. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice filled with a sense of gratitude he hadn't expected. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. Rachel didn't respond immediately, but there was a quiet understanding in her gaze, as if she knew exactly what he meant. And for the first time in a long time, William felt like he was on the right path, not because he had it all figured out, but because he was finally willing to try. As he left the restaurant that night, he felt lighter. The weight of his own expectations had been lifted, replaced by a sense of possibility. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face it, not with power or control, but with openness, honesty, and the willingness to grow. William had spent the past few weeks reflecting on everything Rachel had said to him. The elevator incident, their conversations, the moments of clarity he had experienced. All of it had left him questioning the life he had built. He had always believed that success was measured in power, wealth, and control. But as the days passed, he began to realize how much he had been missing. The people, the connections, the simple moments that could change everything. Rachel had opened his eyes to a world he had long ignored. It wasn't about being the smartest in the room or making the next big deal. It was about understanding the value of human connection, of listening, of being vulnerable. It had taken a while for him to accept this new perspective, but with each passing day, he felt more at peace with it. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was steady. He had started making small changes, reaching out to people, paying attention to the details he had once overlooked. It wasn't easy, and it didn't come naturally, but he was learning. That night, as he sat at his desk in his office overlooking the city, he received a message from Rachel. It was simple, just a few words. Are you coming to the restaurant tonight? For the first time in days, he felt a spark of excitement. He had grown used to the calm presence Rachel brought into his life. She was the one person who didn't expect anything from him, who didn't care about his wealth or his status. She saw him for who he was, not for what he had. William closed his laptop and left the office, feeling a sense of anticipation. When he arrived at the restaurant, the atmosphere was different from the usual hustle and bustle. The lights were dimmed, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air. He spotted Rachel almost immediately, standing near the counter, her calm demeanor never faltering despite the crowd. She glanced up as he approached, her expression unreadable but somehow warm. "You're here," she said, her voice steady as always. "I didn't think you'd come. I told you I would," William replied, offering a small smile. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about paying attention, about being real." Rachel's eyes softened, though her face remained neutral. "And what have you learned?" she asked, as if she already knew the answer. William hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the shift he had experienced. It wasn't just a change in perspective, it was a change in himself. He wasn't the same person who had walked into the restaurant weeks ago, too focused on his own success to notice the world around him. "I've learned that it's not about the money or the power. It's about the people, the relationships. It's about being present, being real with others and with yourself." Rachel nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "That's a good start." William looked around the restaurant, taking in the familiar surroundings. For the first time, he noticed the little things, the way the soft lighting made everything feel warm and inviting, the hum of conversations between strangers, the sound of laughter. It was all part of a world he had been too blind to appreciate. "I've been so focused on building my empire," William said, his voice quieter now, "that I forgot what it was like to live in the moment, to appreciate the simple things." Rachel studied him for a moment before responding. "It's easy to get lost in the pursuit of more. But what's the point if you don't stop to enjoy what you have? You can't take the money with you, but the connections you make, those last." William nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. He had spent so many years accumulating wealth, but now, in this quiet moment with Rachel, he realized that he had missed out on something far more valuable. The relationships, the moments of genuine connection, those were the things that truly mattered. "I'm not saying I'm done with my work," William continued, his voice steady. "But I'm learning to balance it with the things that matter more. The people who matter more." Rachel gave him a thoughtful look, her expression almost unreadable. "It's not easy, is it?" she asked. "No," William admitted, a slight laugh escaping his lips. "But I think I'm ready for it." For a moment, there was silence between them, a comfortable stillness. William felt as though he had finally found a sense of peace he had been searching for all along. It wasn't about the next big deal or the next step in his career. It was about living authentically, about being present in the world and in his relationships. Rachel had shown him that, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. As he stood to leave, he looked at Rachel once more, a sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." She smiled, her eyes gentle but knowing. "You don't need to thank me," she replied. "You just need to keep moving forward." William nodded, a new sense of determination settling in his chest. As he left the restaurant that night, he felt lighter than he had in years. He didn't have all the answers, and he knew there would be challenges ahead, but he was no longer afraid of them. He was ready to face life, not as a businessman trying to control everything, but as someone who was learning to listen, to appreciate, and to be real. And that was enough. William woke up early the next morning, the sunlight filtering through the blinds of his penthouse apartment in New York City. It was a fresh start, a clean slate. The world outside was bustling, full of people going about their busy lives, chasing their own dreams and successes. But for the first time in a long time, William felt something different, clarity. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of change, of reflection, of learning what truly mattered. But it wasn't just the lessons from Rachel that had reshaped him. It was the realization that he had spent so much time running after goals that weren't his own. He had been living in a world of numbers and spreadsheets, but now, he was learning to listen to the quieter things. It wasn't about conquering the world anymore. It was about finding peace in it. And for the first time, William was ready to live in that peace. As he sipped his coffee, his mind drifted back to the restaurant. Rachel had said something that had stayed with him. Success isn't just about making the right moves. It's about the people who matter, the relationships you build along the way. Those words echoed in his mind, and he knew they were the key. William's path forward wasn't going to be about making more money, securing more deals, or acquiring more power. It was going to be about creating something real, something that connected him to the people around him. He wanted to build something that wasn't just based on his own ambition, but on mutual respect, understanding, and support. With this newfound understanding, William had made a decision. He was going to take Rachel's advice seriously. He was going to go beyond the numbers, beyond the surface level of business. It was time to get to work on his life, his real life. He took a deep breath, placed his cup on the table, and pulled out his phone. The first thing he did was call his assistant. "Cancel all my meetings for today," he said, his voice steady, "and clear the rest of the week. I need some time to think and make some changes." "Yes, Mr. Turner," the assistant replied, sounding surprised but not questioning him. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," William said, glancing out the window at the city below. "But it's time for me to do things differently. I'll be in touch soon." After hanging up, William stood up from the table and walked over to his office desk. He looked at the towering skyscrapers outside, their sleek glass windows reflecting the morning sun. He had built this empire, but now, he was determined to build something more meaningful. The first step, he realized, was to connect with the people who had been part of his life but had always been in the background. It wasn't just about building his business. It was about building a life that reflected who he truly was. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was his assistant again, holding a single piece of paper. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice tentative, "I thought you might want to see this." She handed him the paper, and he read it over quickly. It was a list of all the people who had been working for him, people he had relied on for years but had never truly gotten to know. He recognized some names, but others were unfamiliar. For a moment, he felt a pang of guilt. How many of these people had worked tirelessly for him, and yet he had never taken the time to understand their stories, their struggles, their goals. It was time to change that. "I need you to set up a meeting with every one of these people," William said, handing the paper back to his assistant. "Schedule one-on-ones. I want to know them, really know them. I want to hear their stories, understand their goals, and see how we can help each other." The assistant's eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Turner, are you sure?" she asked. "I mean, this is very unorthodox, but if you want." William smiled, feeling a sense of conviction rise in his chest. "Yes, I'm sure. It's time to build something more than just a business. It's time to build a team." His assistant nodded, already making notes on her phone. William felt a rush of excitement. This was the first step in his new journey, and it was a step that was deeply personal. It wasn't about the power he had once sought. It was about the people who had helped him get where he was and the relationships he could now cultivate. Later that day, William went to the restaurant again, eager to speak with Rachel. He found her at the counter, as always, with her calm presence filling the space. This time, though, he wasn't just the businessman. He was the man ready to embrace change. "Rachel," he said as he sat down in front of her, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About paying attention, about relationships, and about being real. I'm ready to make those changes." Rachel looked at him, her expression thoughtful but not surprised. "I'm glad to hear that," she said softly. "But the journey is just beginning. You have to keep learning, keep paying attention, and most importantly, keep being honest with yourself." William smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't there yet, but he was on the right path. For the first time in his life, he was ready to build something that wasn't just about him. He was ready to build something real, with people who mattered, with connections that meant more than power or wealth. It wasn't going to be easy, and he knew that, but it was going to be worth it. As he left the restaurant that evening, he took one last look at Rachel, who had quietly become a symbol of everything he wanted to be. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was someone who wanted to make a difference, who wanted to be remembered for something more than just his fortune. And with that thought, he walked out into the night, ready for whatever came next. William had spent the past few weeks trying to adjust to the new perspective Rachel had helped him uncover. He had started connecting with his team on a deeper level, getting to know the people who had been working for him for years, and understanding what really drove them. It had been a slow process, but he could feel himself changing. The person he had been just a few months ago seemed so distant now, someone obsessed with control, with success at any cost. But now, he was learning the value of patience, of listening, of stepping back and allowing others to take the lead sometimes. That's what had brought him here, to this moment, sitting in the restaurant again. It was a Thursday evening, and the restaurant was quieter than usual. William had come alone, without an agenda. He wasn't here to talk business or to make another grand gesture. He was simply here to be with Rachel. He had come to admire her in ways he hadn't expected. She wasn't just a waitress, not anymore. She was someone who had shown him what it meant to live authentically, and her quiet strength was something he couldn't ignore. As he sat down at the bar, Rachel appeared, her usual calm and collected demeanor greeting him with a soft smile. "Back again?" she asked, her voice warm, though there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "I thought you might need a break from the office," William said with a small grin. He'd taken a step back from his usual routine of endless meetings, delegating tasks to his team while he focused on the bigger picture, himself. "And I needed to see you again." Rachel raised an eyebrow but said nothing, instead sliding a glass of water in front of him. She was always so professional, so composed, yet William could sense the quiet depth she carried beneath the surface. "I've been thinking a lot," William continued, his voice thoughtful. "About everything. About you. About what I've been doing with my life." And Rachel leaned against the counter, folding her arms. Her eyes were warm but assessing, like she was waiting for him to reach his own conclusions. William hesitated for a moment before speaking again, unsure of how to put his thoughts into words. "I've spent so much of my life chasing something I thought would make me happy," he said quietly. "More money, more power, more success. But it's never been enough. I've ignored the things that really matter, the people around me, the connections that could have made a real difference in my life." Rachel didn't speak immediately. She just watched him, her expression unreadable, but William could tell she was listening intently. "I don't know if I can change everything overnight," he said, his voice low. "But I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be more present, to care about the things that really matter." Rachel finally nodded, her gaze softening. "It's not easy," she said, her voice calm but filled with understanding. "Change never is. But you're on the right path." William's chest tightened at her words. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope, of possibility. He wasn't sure exactly what the future held, but for the first time, he was ready to face it without the walls he had built around himself. "I've been so afraid of being vulnerable," he admitted. "Afraid of showing the world who I really am. But I can't keep living like that. I've been so focused on what I could achieve that I've missed everything around me." Rachel's eyes softened as she looked at him. "It's okay to be afraid," she said gently. We all are at some point. But it's what you do with that fear that matters. Are you willing to take the risk? To be real with yourself, with others? William thought for a long moment, weighing her words carefully. The fear he had been carrying for so long wasn't going to disappear overnight, but he realized that he didn't need to have everything figured out. He just needed to start. I think I am, he said, his voice steady. I think I'm ready to start living for the right reasons. Rachel smiled then, a small, knowing smile that made something inside William shift. That's a good place to start. The conversation drifted into comfortable silence as they sat together, each lost in their own thoughts. William felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The constant pressure, the drive for more, it was all still there, but it no longer controlled him. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. The real work, he realized, was about finding balance, about being present, about creating something meaningful with the people who mattered. Later that evening, as he prepared to leave, William felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't just for Rachel, though she had played a huge role in his transformation. It was for the clarity he had gained, for the lessons he had learned, for the willingness to change. He had a long road ahead of him, but he was no longer afraid of it. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere as he stood to leave. Rachel looked up at him, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. You don't need to thank me, she said with a soft smile. Just keep going. Keep being real. William nodded, stepping out into the night air with a renewed sense of purpose. As he walked down the street, the city buzzing around him, he felt ready for whatever came next. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, he felt like he had the right tools to face it. He wasn't in control anymore. He was living, and that was enough. William had never felt so alive. Every day since his conversation with Rachel seemed like a new opportunity, a chance to make things right, to reconnect with the people in his life, and to build something that wasn't just about personal gain. He was still the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, but now, his perspective had shifted. It wasn't the accolades, the deals, or the power that defined him anymore. It was the relationships he built, the moments that meant something, the lives he touched. The clarity he had found had given him a new sense of purpose, and it was one he wasn't willing to let go of. Over the past few weeks, William had kept his promise to himself. He had taken time away from his usual business routine to engage with his team, to understand their motivations, and to really listen. It was difficult at first. He was used to leading with authority, making decisions that affected thousands of people. But as he spent more time with his employees, something unexpected happened. He learned more about leadership than he ever had in the boardroom. People didn't want to just be told what to do. They wanted to be understood, to be seen for who they were beyond their job titles. And as he learned to see them, he began to see himself more clearly, too. The shift wasn't just internal. It was visible to those around him. He'd started to lead with empathy rather than control, with openness instead of distance. It wasn't always easy, and he made mistakes along the way, but he was committed, and it was working. There was, however, still one person who had left an indelible mark on him. Rachel. Her quiet strength and wisdom had completely changed the way he viewed the world. She had been a catalyst for his transformation, but he knew there was more to their connection, more than he had yet understood. And tonight, he intended to find out. William walked into the restaurant, the familiar atmosphere of warmth and calm surrounding him. Rachel was behind the counter, as usual, her posture graceful and composed. She looked up as he entered, and their eyes met. He felt the familiar spark of connection, but now, there was something deeper to it, a shared understanding. You're here again, Rachel said, her voice soft with a hint of amusement. I told you I'd be back, William replied, his voice steady. And this time, I think I'm ready to talk. Rachel raised an eyebrow slightly, but didn't comment on his words. She simply gestured for him to sit at the bar, and William took a seat. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but this felt different. This felt like a turning point. I've been thinking a lot about everything you've said, William began. About paying attention, about relationships, about being real. Rachel listened, her eyes calm and steady. She didn't rush him, just waited for him to find his words. I've spent my whole life building an empire, but it's been built on the wrong things. I've been chasing success in all the wrong ways. And I've missed the things that truly matter, the people who matter, the connections I've ignored. I've been blind to them. Rachel remained quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable, but William could sense the patience in her. She wasn't judging him. She was simply listening. I don't know what to do with all of this yet, he continued, his voice softer now, as though he was speaking more to himself than to her. But I'm trying. I'm trying to learn, to change, to be more than the man I used to be. It's not easy, Rachel said gently. You've spent years building something based on certain values. Changing those values takes time, but it's worth it. William nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had always believed that success came from striving for more. More money, more power, more control. But now, he was realizing that success wasn't about accumulation. It was about connection, about learning to be present, about building something that meant more than just the next big deal. I think I've been afraid, he admitted. Afraid to let go of everything I've built, afraid of showing the world who I really am, afraid that people wouldn't take me seriously if I wasn't always in control. Rachel looked at him, her gaze soft but piercing. It's okay to be afraid, she said. We all are. But being afraid doesn't mean you shouldn't move forward. It just means you have to be brave enough to face it. William was silent for a long moment, letting her words sink in. He had been afraid for so long, afraid to show his true self, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of failure. But in Rachel's presence, he didn't feel the need to hide anymore. He felt seen, understood, and that gave him the courage to face his own fears. I don't know what this means for us, William said finally, his voice uncertain but sincere. But I know I can't keep living in the past. I have to move forward. And I want to move forward with people who understand that. People like you. Rachel's eyes softened as she regarded him. You don't need to have everything figured out right now, she said, her voice quiet but reassuring. You just need to keep taking one step at a time. That's how change happens. William felt a sense of peace wash over him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. He was ready, and he knew that whatever came next, he didn't have to face it alone. As he stood to leave, he looked at Rachel one last time, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had shown him that the real work wasn't about building a business, but about building connections, about being real with others and with himself. And for the first time, he was ready to do that. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. For everything. Rachel smiled, a small, knowing smile that reached her eyes. You don't need to thank me, she said softly. Just keep going. Keep being real. William nodded, stepping out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. He felt lighter than he had in years. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he didn't need them. He was ready to face the future, not with control or ambition, but with openness and connection. And that, he realized, was enough. The weeks that followed were a turning point for William. His commitment to changing his approach to life and leadership was being tested every day. He no longer measured his worth by the number of deals he closed or the market share he had acquired. Instead, he focused on what he could give to the people around him, how he could show up for them in a way that mattered. He spent less time in his office and more time walking through the halls of his company, talking to employees at every level. He asked them questions about their lives, their goals, and what they needed to thrive. Some were hesitant at first, not used to the CEO taking an interest in their well-being, but over time, they began to open up. For the first time, William was truly learning to listen. One afternoon, after a particularly moving conversation with a junior employee about her struggles balancing work and family, William found himself walking back to his office, his mind full of thoughts. He was proud of the changes he had made, but he knew there was more work to be done. He needed to go deeper, to understand the root of the challenges his employees faced, and how he could create an environment where everyone felt valued, heard, and empowered. As he entered his office, he found his assistant waiting for him with a message. Mr. Turner, there's someone here to see you, she said. It's Rachel. William felt a rush of warmth at the mention of her name. He had been seeing her more frequently, not just at the restaurant, but also in casual meetups around the city. She had become more than just someone who had helped him change his perspective. She had become a confidant, a guide. Send her in, he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. When Rachel walked into the room, there was a quiet calm about her, as always. She was dressed simply in a sweater and jeans, Yet she carried herself with a grace that made everything around her seem more grounded. William rose to greet her, his hand instinctively reaching out to shake hers. "Rachel," he said warmly, "it's good to see you." "Likewise," she replied, returning his smile. "I've been hearing good things, William." He gestured for her to sit, and as she did, he took his seat across from her. There was a brief silence before he spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night. About being real, about showing up for people." Rachel nodded. "And?" she asked, her tone encouraging, but not pressing. William leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "I'm seeing things differently now. I'm learning how to listen, how to really connect with the people in my life, not just my business. But there's something else I realized. I've been living in this bubble, in this world of power and control, and I've missed out on so much." Rachel's eyes softened, and she studied him quietly, letting him find his words. "I've been so focused on building an empire that I forgot what it meant to live. I didn't see the people who helped me along the way, the ones who believed in me. I didn't see them as people, only as tools to help me get ahead." Rachel's gaze didn't waver, but William saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes. "That's a big realization," she said softly. "But it's good that you're realizing it now. There's still time to change things." William nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I want to make things right, Rachel. I don't want to keep going down this path of success at any cost. I want to build something with my team, with the people I care about, that's meaningful." Rachel's expression remained calm, but a small smile tugged at her lips. "I think that's a great start," she said. "But it's going to take time. You can't undo years of focusing on the wrong things overnight. You'll make mistakes along the way, but the key is staying committed to the process." William took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but hearing Rachel's words gave him a renewed sense of purpose. "I'm ready for it," he said, his voice firm with determination. "I'm ready to change, to be someone who leads with empathy and understanding." Rachel nodded, her smile widening slightly. "That's the kind of leader people will follow. Not because of the power you have, but because of the person you've become." There was a pause, a moment of silence between them. William looked at Rachel, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything, for helping me see the truth." Rachel looked at him thoughtfully, her eyes soft but steady. "You've always had the ability to see the truth, William. You just needed someone to help you look at it from a different angle." William smiled, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He had always prided himself on his ability to make decisions, to control outcomes. But now, he understood that true power didn't come from control. It came from understanding, from connection. "I'm going to make it count," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. Rachel stood up, ready to leave. "I know you will," she said, her voice steady. "Just remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, being real, and doing the work." William watched her walk out of the office, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't felt before. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just focused on building an empire. He was focused on building something that mattered, a life that was real, that was built on connection and understanding. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them, not alone, but with the people who truly mattered. William's transformation continued, but he knew the real test was still ahead of him. He had spent months reworking his leadership style, his approach to business, and most importantly, his connection with the people around him. But as he walked through the halls of his company, a familiar weight pressed on his chest. It wasn't fear or doubt, it was a sense of responsibility. He had changed, but he still had so much more to learn. His employees had noticed the shift in him, and some were more open now, ready to trust him in ways they hadn't before. But there was still resistance. There were those who didn't believe in his transformation, who saw it as just another phase, another attempt to be something he wasn't. He couldn't blame them. He had been that person, the one who prioritized results over people, who built an empire on the backs of others without ever truly understanding them. But now, as he stood in front of a packed boardroom, his thoughts raced. The team he had assembled was the best in the industry. They had achieved record-breaking growth, but now, it wasn't enough. They were on the verge of entering a new market, but this expansion wasn't just about profit. It was about what kind of company they were going to be going forward. "We're at a crossroads," William began, his voice steady, calm, and clear. Our success up to this point has been driven by the people in this room. But moving forward, we need to be more than just a company. We need to be a place where every person feels valued, where the work we do means something deeper than just bottom-line numbers. The room was quiet. Some faces showed skepticism, while others were nodding, already feeling the weight of his words. This was the first time he had spoken so openly about the company's mission and values in front of the entire leadership team. For years, his conversations had been about metrics, revenue, and goals. Now, he was speaking about something else entirely. I know change is difficult. We're all used to the way things have been done, but we can't keep running on autopilot. We need to lead with empathy, understanding, and trust. That means truly listening to our employees, understanding their challenges, and helping them grow. There was a long pause before one of the senior executives, a woman in her late 40s, spoke up. William, I understand where you're coming from, but we're running a business. We can't lose sight of our financial goals just to make people feel good. William nodded, acknowledging the concern. I hear you, he said. But what I've learned is that when people feel valued, they give more. They work harder, they innovate, and they stay longer. Our growth isn't just about the numbers. It's about building a team that believes in what we're doing, who feels a sense of purpose. The room fell into silence again, but this time, it was a thoughtful one. William could feel the shift. He wasn't just selling an idea anymore. He was showing them a new way of thinking, a way that valued people and relationships as much as it valued profit. Over the next few weeks, William continued to take steps to embody the changes he was talking about. He spent more time in meetings with his team, asking questions about their work, their struggles, and their aspirations. He listened, really listened, instead of just dictating solutions. At first, it felt awkward. He was used to making decisions quickly, with a clear direction in mind. But now, he was pausing, taking the time to understand the situation before acting. It wasn't easy, and not everyone was on board right away. But with each passing day, the team became more cohesive. They began to trust him, and that trust started to translate into better results. People felt heard. They felt seen. William was doing more than just changing the way he led. He was changing the company's culture. He was creating a place where people could thrive, where they could bring their whole selves to work, not just their professional personas. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, and not every decision was a success. But for the first time in his career, William felt like he was moving in the right direction. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, William found himself walking to the restaurant to see Rachel. It had become a ritual of sorts. He had no particular agenda when he went there, no business to discuss. He simply wanted to talk to her, to continue learning from her. When he arrived, the restaurant was quieter than usual, and Rachel was behind the counter, cleaning up. As soon as she saw him, she smiled, and William couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over him. Hey, he said, taking a seat at the counter. I've been thinking. That's dangerous, she joked, her smile still present, but with a glint of playfulness in her eyes. I know, William replied with a laugh. But this time, I think it's for the right reasons. Rachel raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak. I'm starting to see things differently, William continued. I've been focusing on what we're doing wrong for so long that I forgot to focus on what we're doing right. I've been chasing success in the wrong ways. Rachel's expression softened. That's a big step, she said quietly. You've been holding yourself to such high standards, William. But sometimes, the best thing we can do is give ourselves permission to be imperfect. He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. I think I'm finally starting to understand that. And it feels freeing. Rachel smiled. Good. Just don't forget that it's okay to be real with yourself. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to change. William smiled back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her guidance. He wasn't there yet, but he was closer than he had ever been. The journey wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. And for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path, not just in his career, but in his life. It had been a few months since William had made the decision to change his approach to leadership and to life. He had come a long way since the days of obsessing over control, success, and power. Now, he was more focused on connection, empathy, and understanding. He had spent countless hours listening to his employees, hearing their concerns, and learning from their experiences. It hadn't been easy. There were still moments of doubt and resistance, both from others and from himself. But with each passing day, He felt more aligned with the person he wanted to be. His company had started to reflect these changes. The culture within the walls of the organization was shifting, becoming more collaborative, more inclusive, and more human. People weren't just working for the paycheck anymore. They were working because they felt they were part of something bigger. As much as he had come to value these changes, William knew he wasn't done. There was still work to be done on himself, on the way he led, and on the way he connected with the people who mattered most. That's when the opportunity came. William had been invited to a leadership summit in Silicon Valley, a gathering of some of the most successful entrepreneurs and executives in the world. He had debated whether to go or not. The old version of him would have jumped at the chance to network, to be seen, to climb higher. But this time, something felt different. He wasn't going there to prove anything. He was going there to learn. He decided to attend, not with the expectation of gaining more power, but to gain insight into how others were navigating the same challenges he was facing. It wasn't about comparing himself to others anymore. It was about understanding how to bring his lessons to the broader world. The summit took place over 3 days. William sat through countless panels, listened to discussions about innovation, growth, and disruption. But it was a conversation he had with another speaker that stuck with him. She was a woman named Clara, a tech entrepreneur who had built a company from the ground up, much like William. She was dynamic, passionate, and unapologetically real. They were seated at the same table for lunch, and as the conversation turned to leadership and the challenges of growing a business, Clara turned to William and asked, "What's the hardest part about leading for you?" William paused, considering the question. He had been asked similar questions before, but something about Clara's directness made him reflect more deeply. "The hardest part," he began, "is letting go of control. I spent so many years believing that success was about being in control of every detail, that the more I held on to, the more I could achieve. But now, I'm realizing that it's not about control. It's about trust." Clara smiled knowingly, nodding. "Trusting others is one of the hardest things to do," she said, "especially when you've built everything on your own. But when you let go of that control, you make space for the people around you to step up. You give them room to bring their strengths into the mix. And that's when real growth happens." William felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He had heard similar sentiments before, but coming from Clara, someone who had built her own empire while maintaining authenticity and trust, it hit him differently. "You're right," William said, the words almost coming out in a rush. "I've been holding on to control because I was afraid. Afraid that if I let go, things would fall apart. But now, I see that letting go isn't about losing control. It's about gaining something bigger. It's about creating a team, not just a company." Clara smiled again, her eyes bright with understanding. "Exactly. And when you build a team based on trust and respect, you'll find that the business grows in ways you never imagined." The conversation stayed with William long after the summit ended. As he sat on the flight back to New York, he couldn't help but think about the role trust had played in his transformation. He had trusted Rachel to help him see things differently, and now he realized that trust was the key to building something sustainable, something meaningful. It was time to let go of the need for perfection, the need to control every aspect of his business. It was time to trust his team, trust the process, and trust himself. When he returned to the office, William knew that the next step was going to be the hardest yet. He had to let go. He had to empower his team to take ownership of their work, to bring their ideas to the table, and to trust that they would rise to the occasion. It wasn't going to happen overnight, and there would be challenges along the way, but he knew it was the right direction. One of the first steps William took was to schedule a company-wide meeting. He addressed everyone, not just the executives, but the whole team. He talked about the changes he had been through, the lessons he had learned, and the importance of trust moving forward. "I've spent so long trying to control every detail," he said, his voice steady, but filled with sincerity. "But I now realize that we are stronger together. I trust each and every one of you to bring your best to the table. And I trust that, as a team, we will succeed." There was a quiet moment of surprise in the room, but as the words sunk in, William could see the shift. He wasn't just asking for trust from his team, he was offering his own trust to them. It wasn't easy. Letting go of control never is. But as the days passed, William could feel the team stepping up, taking on more responsibility, and bringing fresh ideas to the table. He was no longer the sole decision-maker. He had built a team that he could trust to lead alongside him. The success that followed wasn't just about hitting numbers. It was about the culture that was now flourishing within the company. It was about the people, the relationships, and the trust that had transformed everything. It had been nearly a year since William made the decision to change the way he led and the way he saw the world. His company was thriving, not just in terms of revenue, but in the culture that had blossomed within it. The trust he had built with his team was now a solid foundation, and together, they were pushing the boundaries of what they could achieve. But it wasn't just his business that had transformed. His personal life had flourished too. William had become someone who didn't just go through the motions, checking boxes, and chasing the next achievement. He had learned to appreciate the people around him, to be present in the moments that mattered most. His relationship with Rachel had deepened over the months. She had become a constant in his life, not just as a mentor, but as someone he could trust, someone who truly understood him. They had grown close, sharing not only their successes but also their struggles, and through it all, Rachel had been a steady force in his life. William stood in front of the large windows in his office one morning, overlooking the city as the sun began to rise. The skyline, once a symbol of the empire he had built through sheer willpower, now looked different. It was a reminder of the journey he had been on, of the person he had become. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was someone who understood the value of relationships, the importance of empathy, and the power of connection. As he reflected on the past year, William thought back to when he first met Rachel. It felt like a lifetime ago, when he had been driven by ambition, focused only on the next goal, never stopping to consider what truly mattered. But now, he realized, those were the days when he was blind to the world around him. He had been so fixated on controlling everything that he hadn't noticed the people who had been there all along. It wasn't about having more anymore. It wasn't about proving himself or stacking achievements. It was about living authentically, showing up for others, and embracing vulnerability. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Lunch today? I've been thinking about something." William smiled, his heart lightening at the thought of seeing her. "Of course," he replied. "I'll meet you at the usual place." The restaurant had become their spot, quiet, intimate, and free from the distractions of his corporate world. As he walked through the door, he saw Rachel immediately, sitting at their usual booth, a warm smile on her face as she saw him approach. "Hey there," she said, standing to greet him. "You've been thinking about something, huh?" William asked, sitting down across from her. Rachel chuckled, a playful glint in her eye. "Yes," she said, her tone becoming more serious. "I've been thinking about how far you've come, how much you've changed." William took a moment, absorbing her words. "It's been a long journey," he said, his voice soft. "And I still have a long way to go. But I can't imagine going back to the way I was. I've learned so much from you, Rachel. From your patience, your ability to listen, your honesty." Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You've done the work, William. And it's not just about the business anymore. You've changed the way you show up for yourself and for others. That's the real growth." William smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he admitted. "You helped me see what was right in front of me all along. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I wasn't living. Now, I'm learning how to live, how to connect, how to be present." Rachel's eyes softened, and she reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You don't need to thank me, William. You had it in you all along. You just needed to find your way." He squeezed her hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. They sat in silence for a while, the comfort of each other's presence filling the space between them. For William, it was a reminder that no matter how much success he had achieved, it was the relationships, the real, genuine connections, that made everything worthwhile. Later that afternoon, as William walked back to his office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just looking to achieve more, he was looking to give more. To his team, to the people he cared about, and to himself. The lessons he had learned over the past year had reshaped him into someone who didn't just lead with authority, but with empathy and understanding. As he sat at his desk, he drafted a letter to his team, expressing his gratitude for their hard work, their trust, and their commitment to making the company a place where everyone could thrive. He had always believed that leadership was about making decisions, about guiding people to success. But now, he realized, leadership was about more than that. It was about showing people they mattered. It was about creating a culture where everyone felt heard, valued, and respected. He signed the letter with a simple but powerful message. Together, we'll build something that lasts. Not just a business, but a community. The world outside his office window was still as busy as ever, but William no longer felt the pressure to keep up. He had found something that truly mattered. Something that could outlast any deal, any acquisition, or any financial success. He had found connection. And for the first time, he was truly at peace.